Good morning from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's the 9th of July 2025 and the time is 11:20 a.m. and it's very cold. I don't know what the temperature is. Let me just have a little scooch over and have a look at what my iPhone says. 19 degrees. Feels colder than that. But in the house it's colder. I've got the heater on full blast. Feel that cold. I've even got a woolen jumper on. It's not like me to feel this cold. But anyway, I've had a shower and washed my hair, shaved my legs, put on lipstick and, faffed about all morning and been watching interesting YouTube videos about AI being sentient, which I had a suspicion about that a few years back, so I won't engage with it. Apart from asking Siri to, turn on the timer, use it as a glorified clock. I guess I am using it inadvertently because YouTube and YouTube video making. But all my videos come to you from, my sacred space home to your sacred space home here on planet Earth or wherever our messages get transported across the multiverse and dimensions. There's aliens out there going, who's that weird woman and why is she not wearing full makeup and why is she sitting around complaining about us all the time instead of getting a life? Salient question. I don't know the answer to that. But anyway, there's lots I could be doing. I could be doing the dusting. Dusting was due yesterday because I did it yesterday. A week ago yesterday. Could be doing dusting. But I can't be bothered. I could be cutting down the heliconias and the dragon fruit, cactus. Can't be bothered. It's not like me to not want to work in the garden either. I love my garden. Put a lot of work into this garden. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on, people of Earth. But I'm just content to sit and just look at the beauty of everything and just enjoy my little sacred space home and read stories to my YouTube audience and subscribers and just, live our best lives, really. I didn't want to go out at all yesterday. Yesterday wasn't too bad a day. It's a bit more morose today. It looked like it was going to rain. The sun's sort of come out. But yesterday I didn't even want to go out to the shops. I actually got food delivered by Uber Eats and ordered pizza. That's really bad, that I don't even want to go to the local supermarket anymore. It's just, I don't want to have to deal with people. Actual peopling is creeping me out more than AI at the moment. Oh well, you get that, don't you, when you've been abused for too bloody long. Just the general ugliness of everything. I'd rather sit and look at my garden that I put a lot of work into since 2003 when I moved here, and breathe and relax, enjoy life. I feel like there's another onslaught of something coming and I don't know what it is. And I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I just feel like today is a good day to just enjoy life and relax. There may come a time when I'm having to hit the ground running again and who knows what the universe will ask of me, but sometimes it can be a bit intense, people of Earth. A bit intense. Anyway, I've been having lots of dreams lately. This morning I dreamt of my psychiatrist in this big, like a big holiday resort, but it was like a health resort, like somewhere you go, like a spa, when you're uber wealthy and you can afford to go and get pampered with massages and, you know, proper chef prepared meals, and it was quite wonderful. And in the dream, it felt like it was in Spain, and I was there for my debrief, which in real world would never happen. You wouldn't go to visit your psychiatrist while he's on holiday in Spain. So that was the nonsense part of the dream. And then I had this cute little dog. It looked like part Jack Russell and parts. It didn't look like exactly like Beauregard, but it was more Jack Russell looking than Beauregard used to look. But it was black and white, and it had very short fur. It was a cute little dog. Anyway, it got out of my control somehow in the dream and jumped in the swimming pool, and there was a whole bunch of gay men in the pool, and they're all going, ah, and screaming, and I was like, it's just a dog, calm your farm. Trying to get it out, and then I got it out, and then the groundskeeper came and yelled at me, and I'm like, look, these things happen. I'm not trying to sabotage everyone's wonderful life in their Olympic-sized pool, but, doggies like water too. Anyway, it was quite hilarious. And then in the dream, my psychiatrist came down to protect me and cover my ass and told me that I was very naughty. And I said, you just got out of my control. It won't happen again. Anyway, it was kind of comical, that part of the dream, because it was so true, because it's exactly what my doctor would do if I was in a situation like that. He would defend and protect me. Because he knows I don't do these things maliciously. Doggies, Anyway, I miss my dog. He was a wonderful dog. I used to take him to visit my psychiatrist, actually, for our therapy sessions. Our therapy. And I'd walk in. This is in the time when I was recovering from that terrible gallbladder operation that nearly killed me. And I'd walk in with Beauregard and I'd say, the dog tour is in the house. And my psychiatrist would say, has he been a good dog tour this week? I said, he's healing me, doctor. He's healing me. And he really was very healing, little Beauregard. And my cats, they were very healing too. So you see, it's a big multiverse, and healing can come in all sorts of forms, not just your professionally paid doctors and psychiatrists, but, your little animals, pet animals, and your little birdies too. What do you say, Kermie? What do you say about it all? He says, I'm not healing you, Mummy. I'm not going to heal you. Do you know why he's not going to heal me? Because I'm well on my way to being fully healed. Maybe it will be a process for the rest of my life, but I'm doing better. This morning, 0.8 events. That means I stopped breathing 0.8 times. Yesterday was 0.6. We're getting down. If we get down to 0.0 every morning for, weeks or months, then I will consider myself healed. But there's no guarantee that will happen. That might just happen. It did happen once. A few months ago, it went down to 0. I was like, whoa, man, this thing's starting to work. It's probably changed me into part nanobot, you understand. Anyway, I've got terrible pain, like intramuscular pain across my chest, through my lungs, especially around here. And for 10 months, when I said 9 months on Facebook when I wrote it down, so it was actually 10 months. When I trialled CPAP in 2003, I'd wake up with this terrible pain here, right here, like I've been punched, or this morning it's up higher, like all around my rib cage. So that's not pleasant. That's not pleasant at all. Hopefully that's just one bad night, because if I start getting pain from it every night, it'll get completely shucked off immediately. But it's weird because I haven't had pain from it until now, after 12 months on the 4th of July. So I've done well. I kept my word to my worthy doctors, my urologist and my psychiatrist, that I would stick with it as long as it took. And so what am I saying here? I suspect I'll probably have to be on it for the rest of my life, which is not very glamorous and a pain in my ass, but just gotta do what you gotta do, don't you? Anyway, so the dreaming is I've been dreaming nearly every night, nearly every morning. So that's actually good because I worry when I don't dream because my mind is so artistic and florid and always on the go. If I don't dream, it's like, ooh, shut down mode. So it's good that I'm dreaming, and it's good that my breathing is improving, and it's good that life is pretty bloody marvellous, actually. It's pretty bloody marvellous in the broad scheme of things. Right, so on that note, I thought I'll continue reading W. Somerset Maugham. We've not got that much of the book left to read. Let's just have a look how many short stories are left. That's a very long one. Today's video might have to be split into two. It's a very long story. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The last story in the book's called The Hairless Mexican. That's a bit of an unusual title. I had a few Mexican friends. They were very hairy indeed. So that must be his little in-joke. Not the women, you understand. Just the men people have heard. Although there was Frida Kahlo, wasn't there? Oh, but she was rather beautiful, even with her moustache. Anyway, we're not going to disparage Mexican culture and artists and people because I really like it. I wouldn't mind going to Mexico one day. I want to see Teotihuacan and all the other kind of interesting sacred sites. Anyway, today's story is called, because I'm not going anywhere you understand, just armchair travelling in my mind or on the internet or by reading wonderful stories. Oh, it's a bit sad when you think about it, isn't it? Oh, it could be worse. I could travel to all those wonderful places and the weather could be shitty or be surrounded by awful people and just have a completely miserable time and waste all that money. So, alternatively, I could go to those wonderful places and be surrounded by gorgeous, sexy, desirable, intelligent, interesting people and have the most fabulous times. And, we won't think about that because I'll cry. Anyway, life's what you make of it, is what I'm saying. Right, today's story is called Virtue. There are few things better than a good Havana. I had a friend, a doctor friend, actually he was a specialist, an endocrinologist, who used to love to smoke Havana cigars. He was quite eccentric, a wonderful man, but quite eccentric, as all wonderful people are. Anyway, he always reeked of cigars, like he'd go to hug you and I'd be like, what? Not because of his persona per se, but just the cigar smoke. But, he smoked so much of it that he was all constantly, in a fugue of Havana. He had Havana syndrome, but not actually, just Havana cigar smoke syndrome. Anyway, he was a very kind man to me. Could be a bit rival at times, but he was a very kind man to me. Mama T has not forgotten who her true friends were, and no doubt out there in the cosmos somewhere still are. So this is going to repeat that little sentence because it packs quite a punch actually. There are few things better than a good Havana. When I was young and very poor and smoked a cigar only when somebody gave me one, I determined that if ever I had money, I would smoke a cigar every day after luncheon and after dinner. This is the only resolution of my youth that I have kept. It is the only ambition I have achieved that has never been embittered by disillusion. I like a cigar that is mild but full-flavoured, neither so small that it is finished before you have become aware of it, nor so large as to be irksome, rolled so that it draws without consciousness of effort on your part, with a leaf so firm that it doesn't become messy on your lips, and in such condition that it keeps its savour to the very end. But when you have taken the last pull and put down the shapeless stump and watched the final cloud of smoke dwindle blue in the surrounding air, it is impossible, if you have a sensitive nature, not to feel a certain melancholy at the thought of all the labour, the care and pains that have gone, the thought, the trouble, the complicated organisation that have been required to provide you with half an hour's delight. For this men have sweltered long years under tropical suns, and ships have scoured the seven seas. It's amazing when you think about that actually. It's true. These reflections become more poignant still when you are eating a dozen oysters. Ugh, excuse me, I have to heave. Just the thought of it. But you know, people do like the shellfish. Oh, with half a bottle of dry white wine, also not pleasant to my taste buds. And they become almost unbearable when it comes to a lamb cutlet. For these are animals, and there is something that inspires awe in the thought that, since the surface of the earth became capable of supporting life from generation to generation, for millions upon millions of years, creatures have come into existence to end at last upon a plate of crushed ice or on a silver grill. It may be that a sluggish fancy cannot grasp the dreadful solemnity of eating an oyster, and evolution has taught us that the bivalve has, through the ages, kept itself to itself in a manner that inevitably alienates sympathy. There is an aloofness in it that is offensive to the aspiring spirit of man. I don't know, I never met an aloof oyster. They're just living their best lives, strutting their stuff in the ocean, people of Earth. Usually glued to a rock. The only thing oysters are good for, in my opinion, is being irritated enough to produce a magnificently splendid pearl. It's funny how when I wear my pearls, men get irritated too and kind of a bit jealous and sometimes a bit lustful. The thought of me wearing my pearls and swinging them as I mosh and tucking them down inside my corset to keep them out of my way sends men into frenzies. People of Earth, absolute lust-driven frenzies. It's just a byproduct of an oyster. You will want to crack open, shuck out and shuck off like you did with the time. Gorgeous. Celery pickles. Right, where was I? Oh yes. I do not know how anyone can look upon a lamb cutlet without thoughts too deep for tears. Here man himself has taken a hand, and the history of the race is bound up with the tender morsel on your plate. And perhaps even the fate of human beings is curious to consider. It is strange to look. Oh, it's got a sharp pain in my eye. Oh, over. These things happen. Let me start again. It is strange to look upon this man or that, the quiet, ordinary persons of every day, the bank clerk, the dustman, the middle-aged girl in the second row of the chorus, and think of the interminable history behind them, and of the long, long series of hazards by which form the primeval slime the course of events has brought them at this moment to such and such a place. Quietly osmosing in the corner, you understand. When such tremendous vicissitudes have been needed to get them here or at all, one would have thought some huge significance must be attached to them. One would have thought that what befell them must matter a little to the life spirit or whatever else it is that has produced them. An accident befalls them. The thread is broken. The story that began with the world is finished abruptly, and it looks as though it meant nothing at all. A tale told by an idiot. And is it not odd that this event of an importance so dramatic may be brought about by a cause so trivial? An incident of no moment that might easily not have happened has consequences that are incalculable. It looks as though blind chance ruled all things. Our smallest actions may affect profoundly the whole lives of people who have nothing to do with us. The story I have to tell would never have happened if one day I had not walked across the street. Life is really very fantastic, and one has to have a peculiar sense of humour to see the fun of it. I was strolling down Bond Street one spring morning, and, having nothing much to do till lunchtime, thought I would look in at Sotheby's, the auction rooms, to see whether there was anything on show that interested me. There was a block in the traffic, and I threaded my way through the cars. Just want to see what he's chomping on. Are you chomping on your own beak, you mad little bird? You are? Why are you doing that? Why are you grinding your own gears? You've got sunflower seeds to chomp on, and corn to chomp on, and apple to chomp on. You've even got the bars of your flaming cage to chomp on. And what do? Self-immolating. Self-immolating, people of Earth. Okay. his beacon, his business, not my circus, not my monkey, am I right? Quite literally. By the gods, all my children end up psychotic. I don't know. There was a block in the traffic and I threaded my way through the cars. When I reached the other side, I ran into a man I had known in Borneo coming out of a hatter's. "Hello, Morton," I said. "When did you come home?" "I've been back about a week." He was a district officer. The governor had given me a letter of introduction to him, and I wrote and told him I meant to spend a week at the place he lived at and would like to put up at the government rest house. He met me on the ship when I arrived and asked me to stay with him. I demurred. I did not see how I could spend a week with a total stranger. I did not want to put him to the expense of my board, and besides, I thought I should have more freedom if I were on my own. He would not listen to me. "I've got plenty of room," he said, "and the rest house is beastly. I haven't spoken to a white man for 6 months, and I'm fed to the teeth with my own company." But when Morton had got me and his launch had landed us at the bungalow, and he had offered me a drink, he did not in the least know what to do with me. He was seized on a sudden with shyness, and his conversation, which had been fluent and ready, ran dry. I did my best to make him feel at home. It was the least I could do, considering that it was his own house, and asked him if he had any new records. He turned on the gramophone, and the sound of ragtime gave him confidence. His bungalow overlooked the river, and his living room was a large veranda. It was furnished in the impersonal fashion that characterized the dwellings of government officials, who were moved here and there at little notice according to the exigencies of the service. I saw the turkey, but it's not. Oh. There were native hats as ornaments on the walls, and the horns of animals, blowpipes, and spears. In the bookshelf were detective novels and old magazines. There was a cottage piano with yellow keys. It was very untidy, but not uncomfortable. Unfortunately, I cannot very well remember what he looked like. Got a bit of smush on my glasses and it's driving me mental. Let me just give it a bit of a wipe before that. Honestly, everything happens to me, doesn't it? Smushy glasses. I hope it comes off, whatever that is, because it's going to be annoying if it doesn't. Better, slightly. Unfortunately, I cannot very well remember what he looked like. He was young, 28, I learnt later, and he had a boyish and attractive smile. I spent an agreeable week with him. We went up and down the river, and we climbed a mountain. We had tiffin one day with some planters who lived 20 miles away, and every evening we went to the club. The only members were the manager of a catch factory and his assistants, but they were not on speaking terms with one another, and it was only on Morton's representations that they must not let him down when he had a visitor that we could get up a rubber of bridge. The atmosphere was strained. We came back to dinner, listened to the gramophone, and went to bed. Morton had little office work, and one would have thought the time hung heavy on his hands, but he had energy and high spirits. It was his first post of the sort, and he was happy to be independent. His only anxiety was lest he should be transferred before he had finished a road he was building. This was the joy of his heart. It was his own idea, and he had wheedled the government into giving him the money to make it. He had surveyed the country himself and traced the path. He had solved unaided the technical problems that presented themselves. Every morning, before he went to his office, he drove out on a rickety old Ford to where the coolies were working and watched the progress that had been made since the day before. He thought of nothing else. He dreamt of it at night. He reckoned that it would be finished in a year, and he did not want to take his leave till then. He could not have worked with more zest if he had been a painter or a sculptor creating a work of art. I think it was this eagerness that made me take a fancy to him. I liked his zeal. I liked his ingenuousness. And I was impressed by the passion for achievement that made him indifferent to the solitariness of his life, to promotion, and even to the thought of going home. I forget how long the road was, 15 or 20 miles, I think, and I forget what purpose it was to serve. I don't believe Morton cared very much. His passion was the artist's, and his triumph was the triumph of man over nature. He learnt as he went along. He had the jungle to contend with, torrential rains that destroyed the labour of weeks, accidents of topography. He had to collect his labour and hold it together. He had inadequate funds. His imagination sustained him. His labours gained a sort of epic quality, and the vicissitudes of the work were a great saga that unrolled itself with an infinity of episodes. His only complaint was that the day was too short. He had office duties. He was judge and tax collector, father and mother at 28 of the people in his district. He had now and then to make tours that took him away from home. Unless he was on the spot, nothing was done. He would have liked to be there 24 hours a day, driving the reluctant coolies to further effort. It so happened that shortly before I arrived, an incident had occurred that filled him with jubilation. He had offered a contract to a Chinese to make a certain section of the road, and the Chinese had asked more than Morton could afford to pay. Notwithstanding interminable discussions, they had been unable to arrive at an agreement, and Morton, with rage in his heart, saw his work held up. He was at his wits' end. Then, going down to his office one morning, he heard that there had been a row in one of the Chinese gambling houses the night before. A coolie had been badly wounded and his assailant was under arrest. This assailant was the contractor. He was brought into court, the evidence was clear, and Morton sentenced him to 18 months hard labour. Now he'll have to build the blasted road for nothing, said Morton, his eyes glistening when he told me the story. We saw the fellow at work one morning in the prison sarong, unconcerned. He was taking his misfortune in good part. I've told him I'll remit the rest of the sentence when the road's finished, said Morton, and he's as pleased as Punch. Bit of a snip for me, eh what? When I left Morton, I asked him to let me know when he came to England, and he promised to write to me as soon as he landed. On the spur of the moment, one gives these invitations, and one is perfectly sincere about them. But when one is taken at one's word, a slight dismay seizes one. People are so different at home from what they are abroad. There they are, easy, cordial and natural. They have interesting things to tell you. They are immensely kind. You are anxious when your turn comes to do something in return for the hospitality you have received. But it is not easy. The persons who were so entertaining in their own surroundings are very dull in yours. They are constrained and shy. You introduce them to your friends, and your friends find them a crashing bore. They do their best to be civil, but sigh with relief when the strangers go, and the conversation can run once more easily in its accustomed channels. I think the residents in far places early in their careers understand the situation pretty well, as the result may be of bitter and humiliating experiences, for I have found that they seldom take advantage of the invitation which on some outstation on the edge of the jungle has been so cordially extended to them and by them as cordially accepted. But Morton was different. He was a young man and single. It is generally the wives that are the difficulty. Other women look at their drab clothes and a glance taken their provincial air and freeze them with their indifference. But a man can play bridge and tennis and dance. Morton had charm. I had had no doubt that in a day or two he would find his feet. Why didn't you let me know you were back? I asked him. I thought you wouldn't want to be bothered with me, he smiled. What nonsense! Of course now, as we stood in Bond Street on the curb and chatted for a minute, he looked strange to me. I had never seen him in anything but khaki shorts and a tennis shirt, except when we got back from the pub at night and he put on a pyjama jacket and a sarong for dinner. It is as comfortable a form of evening dress as has ever been devised. He looked a bit awkward in his blue serge suit. His face against a white collar was very brown. "How about the road?" I asked him. "Finished. I was afraid I'd have to postpone my leave. We struck one or two snags towards the end, but I made 'em hustle, and the day before I left, I drove the Ford to the end and back without stopping." I laughed. His pleasure was charming. "What have you been doing with yourself in London?" "Buying clothes." "Been having a good time?" "Marvellous. A bit lonely, you know, but I don't mind that. I've been to a show every week, every night. The Palmers, you know. I think you met them at Sarawak. We're going to be in town and we were going to do the play together, but they had to go to Scotland because her mother's ill." His words, said so breezily, cut me to the quick. His was the common experience. It was heartbreaking. For months, for long months before it was due, these people planned their leave, and when they got off the ship they were in such spirits they could hardly contain themselves. London. Shops and clubs and theatres and restaurants. London. They were going to have the time of their lives. London. It swallowed them. A strange, turbulent city, not hostile, but indifferent, and they were lost in it. They had no friends. They had nothing in common with the acquaintances they made. They were more lonely than in the jungle. It was a relief when at a theatre they ran across someone they had known in the East and perhaps been bored stiff by or disliked, and they could fix up an evening together and have a good laugh and tell one another what a grand time they were having and talk of common friends and at last confide to one another a little shyly that they would not be sorry when their leave was up and they were once again in harness. They went to see their families and of course they were glad to see them, but it wasn't the same as it had been. They did feel a bit out of it. And when you came down to brass tacks, the life people led in England was deadly. It was grand fun to come home, but you couldn't live there any more, and sometimes you thought of your bungalow overlooking the river and your tours of the district, and what a lark it was to run over once in a blue moon to Sandakan or Kuching or Singapore. And because I remembered what Morton had looked forward to when, the road finished and off his chest, he went on leave, I could not but feel a pang when I thought of him dining by himself in a dismal club where he knew nobody, or alone in a restaurant in Soho, and then going off to see a play with no one by his side with whom he could enjoy it, and no one to have a drink with during the interval. And at the same time, I reflected that even if I had known he was in London, I could have done nothing much for him, for during the past week I had not had a moment free. But that very evening, I was dining with friends and going to a play, and the next day I was going abroad. "What are you doing tonight?" I asked him. "I'm going to the Pavilion. It's packed jammed full, but there's a fellow over the road who's wonderful, and he's got me a ticket that had been returned. You can often get one seat, you know. when you can't get to. Why don't you come and have supper with me? I'm taking some people to the Haymarket, and we're going on to Syros afterwards. I'd love to. We arranged to meet at 11, and I left him to keep an engagement. I was afraid the friends I had asked him to meet would not amuse Morton very much, for they were distinctly middle-aged, but I could not think of anyone young that at this season of the year I should be likely to get hold of at the last moment. None of the girls I knew would thank me for asking her to supper to dance with a shy young man from Malaya. I could trust the bishops to do their best for him, and after all, it must be jollier for him to have supper in a club with a good band where he could see pretty women dancing than to go home to bed at 11 because he had nowhere else in the world to go. I had known Charlie Bishop first when I was a medical student. He was then a thin fellow with sandy hair and blunt features. He had fine eyes, dark and gleaming, but he wore spectacles. He had a round, merry, red face. He was very fond of the girls. I suppose he had a way with them, for, with no money and no looks, he managed to pick up a succession of young persons who gratified his roving desires. He was clever and bumptious, argumentative and quick-tempered. He had a caustic tongue. Reminds me of someone. Looking back, I should say he was a rather disagreeable young man, but I do not think he was a bore. Now, halfway through the 50s, he was inclined to be stout, and he was very bald, but his eyes behind the gold-rimmed spectacles were still bright and alert. He was dogmatic and somewhat conceited, argumentative still, and caustic. But he was good-natured and amusing. After you have known a person so long, his idiosyncrasies cease to trouble you. You accept them as you accept your own physical defects. He was by profession a pathologist, and now and then he sent me a slim book he had just published. It was severe and extremely technical and grimly illustrated with photographs of bacteria. I did not read it. I gathered from what I sometimes heard that Charlie's views on the subjects with which he dealt were unsound. I did not believe that he was very popular with the other members of his profession. He made no secret of the fact that he looked upon them as a set of incompetent idiots. But he had his job. It brought him in 600 or 800 a year, I think, and he was completely indifferent to other people's opinion of him. I liked Charlie Bishop because I had known him for 30 years, but I liked Marjorie, his wife, because she was very nice. I was extremely surprised when he told me he was going to be married. He was hard on 40 at the time, and so fickle in his affections that I had made up my mind he would remain single. He was very fond of women, but he was not in the least sentimental, and his aims were loose. His views on the female sex would in these idealistic days be thought crude. He knew what he wanted, and he asked for it, and if he couldn't get it for love or money, he shrugged his shoulders and went his way. To be brief, he did not look to women to gratify his ideal, but to provide him with fornication. Sorry, it's so funny how you worded that. It was odd that, though small and plain, he found so many who were prepared to grant his wishes. For his spiritual needs, he found satisfaction in unicellular organisms. He had always been a man who spoke to the point, and when he told me he was going to marry a young woman called Marjorie Hobson, I did not hesitate to ask him why. Let's turn this heater off, I think. It's getting a bit steamy here. It's steamy in here, people, though. And not because of Charlie Bishop's fornication, you understand. Who doesn't mind a bit of fornication when you can get it with someone who's actually, genuine and heartfelt and into you? Literally. But more ways than one, darling. Anyway, never mind. We won't carry on about that. We'll just laugh, and laugh again. Anyway, he grinned. 3 reasons. First, she won't let me go to bed with her without. What does that mean? She won't let me go to bed with her without. I think it means exactly what he insinuates by that. Second, she makes me laugh like a hyena. Always very seductive, that. And third, she's alone in the world without a single relation, and she must have someone to take care of her. Oh, I see. A charity fuck. Beware the white knight syndrome types. I'm already, my skin just crawled right off me right just now, just thinking about that. But anyway, never mind. The first reason is just swank, and the second is eyewash. The third is the real one, and it means that she's got you by the short hairs. I guess that was a generation when men actually thought it was noble to look after a woman, provide for her, and give her some kind of a life, people of earth. Still happens from time to time that you meet honouring, sweet, genuine men, but they're rare as hen's teeth now. Rare as hen's teeth. And they don't know how to handle a woman who's independent-minded and courageous and stoic and, idealistic. They really don't. They want to kill you. They're threatened by your strength and your vitality and your rebelliousness and your defiance. It is what it is, people. His eyes gleamed softly behind his large spectacles. I shouldn't be surprised if you weren't dead right. She's not only got you by the short hairs, but you're as pleased as Punch that she has. Come and lunch tomorrow and have a look at her. She's easy on the eye. Charlie was a member of a cock and hen club, which at that time I used a good deal, and we arranged to lunch there. I found Marjorie a very attractive young woman. She was then just under 30. She was a lady. I noticed the fact with satisfaction, but with a certain astonishment, for it had not escaped my notice that Charlie was attracted, as a rule, by women whose breeding left something to be desired. She was not beautiful, but comely, with fine dark hair and fine eyes, a good colour and a look of health. She had a pleasant frankness and an air of candour that were very taking. She looked honest, simple and dependable. I took an immediate liking to her. She was easy to talk to, and though she did not say anything very brilliant, she understood what other people were talking about. She was quick to see a joke, and she was not shy. She gave you the impression of being competent and businesslike. She had a happy placidity that suggested a good temper and an excellent digestion. All very important things in a woman. Honestly. They seemed extremely pleased with one another. I had asked myself when I first saw her why Marjorie was marrying this irritable little man, boordish already and by no means young, but I discovered very soon that it was because she was in love with him. They chaffed one another a good deal and laughed a lot, and every now and then their eyes met more significantly, and they seemed to exchange a little private message. It was really rather touching. A week later they were married at a registrar's office. It was a very successful marriage. Looking back now, after 16 years, I could not but chuckle sympathetically at the thought of the lark they had made of their life together. I had never known a more devoted couple. They had never had very much money. They never seemed to want any. They had no ambitions. Their life was a picnic that never came to an end. They lived in the smallest flat I ever saw in Panton Street, a small bedroom, a small sitting room, and a bathroom that served also as a kitchen. It's not very hygienic, is it? You've got it. But they had no sense of home. They ate their meals in restaurants and only had breakfast in the flat. It was merely a place to sleep in. It was comfortable, though a third person coming in for a whisky and soda crowded it, and Marjorie, with the help of a charwoman, kept it as neat as Charlie's untidiness permitted. But there was not a single thing in it that had a personal note. They had a tiny car, and whenever Charlie had a holiday, they took it across the channel and started off with a bag each for all their luggage to drive wherever the fancy took them. Breakdowns never disturbed them. Bad weather was part of the fun. A puncture was no end of a joke. And if they lost their way and had to sleep out in the open, they thought they were having the time of their lives. Charlie continued to be irascible and contentious, but nothing he did ever disturbed Marjorie's lovely placidity. She could calm him with a word. She still made him laugh. She typed his monographs on obscure bacteria and corrected the proofs of his articles in the scientific magazines. Once I asked them if they ever quarrelled. No, she said, we never seem to have anything to quarrel about. Charlie has the temper of an angel. Nonsense, I said. He's an overbearing, aggressive and cantankerous fellow. He always has been. She looked at him and giggled, and I saw that she thought I was being funny. Let him rave, said Charlie. He's an ignorant fool, and he uses words of whose meaning he hasn't the smallest idea. They were sweet together. They were very happy in one another's company, and were never apart if they could help it. Even after the long time they had been married, Charlie used to get into the car every day at luncheon time to come west and meet Marjorie at a restaurant. People used to laugh at them, not unkindly, but perhaps with a little catch in the throat, because when they were asked to go and spend a weekend in the country, Marjorie would write to the hostess and say they would like to come if they could be given a double bed. They had slept together for so many years that neither of them could sleep alone. It was often a trifle awkward. Husbands and wives, as a rule, not only demanded separate rooms, but were inclined to be peevish if asked to share the same bathroom. Modern houses were not arranged for domestic couples, but among their friends it became an understood thing that if you wanted the bishops, you must give them a room with a double bed. Some people, of course, thought it a little indecent, and it was never convenient, but they were a pleasant pair to have to stay, and it was worth while to put up with their crankiness. I have a queen-size bed. Nobody ever comes to stay here. Oh, but on the other hand, I'm not being annoyed or irritated by other people's idiosyncrasies if they choose not to stay here. So there was that. I'm still thinking maybe about selling that bed. It's kind of obsolescent piece of furniture. It only serves to have clothes, my clean washing thrown onto it for sorting and storing all my corsets that are still waiting to be dry cleaned, by the way. By the gods, dry cleaning costs a fortune these days. It really does. But anyway, what did they charge me last time? $35 for each corset. It was outrageous. Anyway, I haven't been wearing them because I haven't been dancing. So there was that. Anyway, Charlie was always full of spirits and in his caustic way extremely amusing. Yes, Kirby. Kirby! And Marjorie was peaceful and easy. They were no trouble to entertain. Nothing pleased them more than to be left to go out together for a long ramble in the country. So it actually kind of sounds like they weren't just husband and wife, but they were great friends and really genuinely enjoyed each other's companionship, which is lovely. When a man marries, his wife sooner or later estranges him from his old friends. Depends on the friends, doesn't it? Anyway, but Marjorie, on the contrary, increased Charlie's intimacy with him. By making him more tolerant, she made him a more agreeable companion. They gave you the impression not of a married couple, but, rather amusingly, of two middle-aged bachelors living together. And when Marjorie, as was the rule, found herself the only woman among half a dozen ribald, argumentative, and gay, she was not a bar to good fellowship, but an asset. Whenever I was in England, I saw them. They generally dined at the club of which I have spoken, and if I happened to be alone, I joined them. When we met that evening for a snack before going to the play, I told them I had asked Morton to come to supper. I'm afraid you'll find him rather dull, I said, but he's a very decent sort of boy, and he was awfully kind to me when I was in Borneo. Why didn't you let me know sooner? Cried Marjorie. I'd have brought a girl along. What do you want a girl for? Said Charlie. There'll be you. I don't think it can be much fun for a young man to dance with a woman of my advanced years, said Marjorie. Rot! What's your age got to do with it? He turned to me. Have you ever danced with anyone who danced better? I had, but she certainly danced very well. She was light on her feet, and she had a good sense of rhythm. Never, I said heartily. Morton was waiting for us when we reached Sea Rose. He looked very sunburned in his evening clothes. Perhaps it was because I knew that they had been wrapped away in a tin box with mothballs for 4 years that I felt he did not look quite at home in them. Oh, the stench of mothballs! I would not have been able to stand next to him if his clothes had been kept in those for 4 years. I would have immediately started heaving and had to excuse myself. I can't abide the smell of naphthalene. Maybe I'm part moth woman after all. Oh, smallest violin. Diddly, 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 diddly. Boom, 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 boom. Anyway, he was certainly more at ease in khaki shorts. Charlie Bishop was a good talker and liked to hear himself speak. Morton was shy. I gave him a cocktail and ordered some champagne. I had a feeling that he would be glad to dance, but was not quite sure whether it would occur to him to ask Marjorie. I was acutely conscious that we all belonged to another generation. I think I should tell you that Mrs. Bishop is a beautiful dancer, I said. Is she? He flushed a little. Will you dance with me? She got up and they took the floor. She was looking peculiarly nice that evening. Not at all smart, and I do not think her plain black dress had cost more than 6 guineas. But she looked a lady. She had the advantage of having extremely good legs, and at that time skirts were still being worn very short. I suppose she had a little make-up on, but in contrast with the other women there, she looked very natural. Shingled hair suited her. It was not even touched with white, and it had an attractive sheen. She was not a pretty woman, but her kindliness, her wholesome air, her good health gave you, if not the illusion that she was, at least the feeling that it didn't at all matter. When she came back to the table, her eyes were bright and she had a heightened colour. How does he dance? Asked her husband. Divinely. You're very easy to dance with, said Morton. Charlie went on with his discourse. He had a sardonic humour, and he was interesting because he was himself so interested in what he said. But he spoke of things that Morton knew nothing about, and though he listened with a civil show of interest, I could see that he was too much excited by the gaiety of the scene, the music, and the champagne to give his attention to conversation. When the music struck up again, his eyes immediately sought Marjorie's. Charlie caught the look and smiled. Dance with him, Marjorie. Good for my figure to see you take exercise. They set off again, and for a moment Charlie watched her with fond eyes. Marjorie's having the time of her life. She loves dancing, and it makes me puff and blow. Not a bad youth. My little party was quite a success, and when Morton and I, having taken leave of the bishops, walked together towards Piccadilly Circus, he thanked me warmly. He had really enjoyed himself. I said good-bye to him. Next morning I went abroad. I was sorry not to have been able to do more for Morton, and I knew that when I returned he would be on his way back to Borneo. I gave him a passing thought now and then, but by the autumn, when I got home, he had slipped my memory. After I had been in London a week or so, I happened to drop in one night at the club to which Charlie Bishop also belonged. He was sitting with 3 or 4 men I knew, and I went up. I had not seen any of them since my return. One of them, a man called Bill Marsh, whose wife, Janet, was a great friend of mine, asked me to have a drink. "Where have you sprung from?" asked Charlie. "Haven't seen you about lately." I noticed at once that he was drunk. I was astonished. Charlie had always liked his liquor, but he carried it well and never exceeded. In years gone by, when we were very young, he got tight occasionally, but probably more than anything to show what a great fellow he was, and it is unfair to bring up against a man the excesses of his youth. But I remembered that Charlie had never been very nice when he was drunk. His natural aggressiveness was exaggerated then, and he talked too much and too loud, and he was very apt to be quarrelsome. He was very dogmatic now, laying down the law and refusing to listen to any of the objections his rash statements called forth. The others knew he was drunk and were struggling between the irritation his cantankerousness aroused in them and the good-natured tolerance which they felt his condition demanded. He was not an agreeable object. A man of that age, bald and fattish, with spectacles, is disgusting drunk. He was generally rather dapper, but he was untidy now, and there was tobacco ash all over him. Charlie called the waiter and ordered another whisky. The waiter had been at the club for 30 years. "You've got one in front of you, sir." "Mind your own damned business," said Charlie Bishop. "Bring me a double whisky right away, or I'll report you to the secretary for insolence." "Very good, sir," said the waiter. Charlie emptied his glass at a gulp, but his hand was unsteady and he spilled some of the whisky over himself. "Well, Charlie, old boy, we'd better be toddling along," said Bill Marsh. He turned to me. "Charlie's staying with us for a bit." I was more surprised still, but I felt that something was wrong and thought it safer not to say anything. "I'm ready," said Charlie. "I'll just have another drink before I go. I shall have a better night if I do." It did not look to me as though the party would break up for some time, so I got up and announced that I meant to stroll home. "I say," said Bill as I was about to go, "you wouldn't come and dine with us tomorrow night, would you? Just me and Janet and Charlie?" Yes, I'll come with pleasure, I said. It was evident that something was up. The Marshes lived in a terrace on the east side of Regent's Park. The maid who opened the door for me asked me to go into Mr. Marsh's study. He was waiting for me there. I thought I'd better have a word with you before you went upstairs, he said as he shook hands with me. You know Marjorie's left Charlie? No. He's taken it very hard. Janet thought it was so awful for him alone in that beastly little flat that she asked him to stay here for a bit. We've done everything we could for him. He's been drinking like a fish. He hasn't slept a wink for a fortnight. But she hasn't left him for good. I was astounded. Yes, she's crazy about a fellow called Morton. Morton? Who's he? It never struck me it was my friend from Borneo. Damn it all. You introduced him, and a pretty piece of work you did. Let's go upstairs. I thought I'd better put you wise. He opened the door and we went out. I was thoroughly confused. But look here, I said. Ask Janet. She knows the whole thing. It beats me. I've got no patience with Marjorie, and he must be a mess. He preceded me into the drawing room. Janet Marsh rose as I entered and came forward to greet me. Charlie was sitting at the window, reading the evening paper. He put it aside as I went up to him and shook his hand. He was quite sober, and he spoke in his usual rather perky manner, but I noticed that he looked very ill. We had a glass of sherry and went down to dinner. Janet was a woman of spirit. She was tall and fair and good to look at. She kept the conversation going with alertness. When she left us to drink a glass of port, it was with instructions not to stay more than 10 minutes. Bill, as a rule somewhat taciturn, exerted himself now to talk. I tumbled to the game. I was hampered by my ignorance of what exactly had happened, but it was plain that the Marshes wanted to prevent Charlie from brooding, and I did my best to interest him. He seemed willing to play his part. He was always fond of holding forth, and he discussed, from the pathologist's standpoint, a murder that was just then absorbing the public. But he spoke without life. He was an empty shell, and one had the feeling that, though for the sake of his host he forced himself to speak, his thoughts were elsewhere. It was a relief when a knocking on the floor above indicated to us that Janet was getting impatient. This was an occasion when a woman's presence eased the situation. We went upstairs and played family bridge. When it was time for me to go, Charlie said he would walk with me as far as the Marleybone Road. Oh, Charlie, it's so late. You'd much better go to bed, said Janet. I shall sleep better if I have a stroll before turning in, he replied. She gave him a worried look. You cannot forbid a middle-aged professor of pathology from going for a little walk if he wants to. She glanced brightly at her husband. I dare say it'll do Bill no harm. I think the remark was tactless. Women are often a little too managing. Charlie gave her a sullen look. There's absolutely no need to drag Bill out, he said with some firmness. I haven't the smallest intention of coming, said Bill, smiling. I'm tired out, and I'm going to hitch the hay. I fancy we left Bill Marsh and his wife to a little argument. They've been frightfully kind to me, said Charlie, as he walked along by the railings. I don't know what I should have done without them. I haven't slept for a fortnight. I expressed regret, but did not ask the reason, and we walked for a little in silence. I presumed that he had come with me in order to talk to me of what had happened, but I felt that he must take his own time. You're very quiet, Kermie. You're sitting up there like a stool pigeon, not even moving. Kermie. Let me just check on the Kermie boy. What's going on up there, little Kermie boy? What are you doing? Oh, my sweet little baby. And what about you, little boy? You sweet little baby bird too? I'm 45, Mama too. Alright, well you're 45 and whatever. We're just living in this space-time continuum together. I wish you'd come out and fly, little boy. Yes. I think he's still a bit overwhelmed about suddenly having a much larger cage. Anyway, it's all good. I was anxious to show my sympathy, but afraid of saying the wrong things. I did not want to seem eager to extract confidences from him. I did not know how to give him a lead. I was sure he did not want one. He was not a man given to beating about the bush. I imagined that he was choosing his words. We reached the corner. You'll be able to get a taxi at the church, he said. I'll walk on a bit further. Good night. He nodded and slouched off. I was taken aback. There was nothing for me to do. I'm trying to get comfortable with this book, damn it. Oh, sliding away. And they're on the destination. One more on. Sliding away. Baby boys and baby girls. Let's try this. Yeah, that will do. Sort of, kind of, but not really. I've still got that pain in my chest. It's very painful. Oh well. There was nothing for me to do but to stroll on till I found a cab. I was having my bath next morning when a telephone call dragged me out of it, and with a towel round my wet body, I took up the receiver. It was Janet. Well, what do you think of it all? She said. You seem to have kept Charlie up pretty late last night. I heard him come home at 3. He left me at the Marylebone Road, I answered. He said nothing to me at all. Didn't he? There was something in Janet's voice that suggested that she was prepared to have a long talk with me. I suspected she had a telephone by the side of her bed. Look here, I said quickly. I'm having my bath. Oh, have you got a telephone in your bathroom? She answered eagerly, and I think with envy. No, I haven't. I was abrupt and firm. And I'm dripping all over the carpet? Oh! I felt disappointment in her tone and a trace of irritation. Well, when can I see you? Can you come here at 12? It was inconvenient, but I was not prepared to start an argument. Yes, goodbye. I rang off before she could say anything more. In heaven, when the blessed use the telephone, they will say what they have to say and not a word beside. I was devoted to Janet, but I knew there was nothing that thrilled her more than the misfortunes of her friends. She was only too anxious to help them, but she wanted to be in the thick of their difficulties. She was the friend in adversity. Other people's business was meat and drink to her. You could not enter upon a love affair without finding her somehow your confidant, nor be mixed up in a divorce case without discovering that she too had a finger in the pie. Withal, she was a very nice woman. I could not help then chuckling in my heart when, at noon, I was shown into Janet's drawing room and observed the subdued eagerness with which she received me. She was very much upset by the catastrophe that had befallen the Bishops, but it was exciting and she was tickled to death to have someone fresh whom she could tell all about it. Janet had just that business-like expectancy that a mother has when she is discussing with the family doctor her married daughter's first confinement. Janet was conscious that the matter was very serious, and she would not for a moment have been thought to regard it flippantly, but she was determined to get every ounce of value out of it. I mean, no one could have been more horrified than I was when Marjorie told me she'd finally made up her mind to leave Charlie, she said, speaking with the fluency of a person who has said the same thing in the same words a dozen times at least. They were the most devoted couple I'd ever known. It was a perfect marriage. They got on like a house on fire. Of course, Bill and I are devoted to one another, but we have awful rows now and then. I mean, I could kill him sometimes. I don't care a hang about your relations with Bill, I said. Tell me about the Bishops. That's what I've come for. I simply felt I must see you. After all, you're the only person who can explain it. Oh, God, don't go on like that. Until Bill told me last night, I didn't know a thing about it. That was my idea. It suddenly dawned on me that perhaps you didn't know, and I thought you might put your foot in it too awfully. Supposing you began at the beginning, I said. Well, you're the beginning. After all, you started the trouble. You introduced the young man. That's why I was so crazy to see you. You know all about him. I never saw him. All I know is what Marjorie has told me about him. At what time are you lunching? I asked. 1:30. So am I. Get on with the story. But my remark had given Janet an idea. Look here. Will you get out of your luncheon if I get out of mine? We could have a snack here. I'm sure there's some cold meat in the house, and then we needn't hurry. I don't have to be at the hairdresser's till 3. No, I said. I hate the notion of that. I shall leave here at 20 minutes past 1 at the latest. Then I shall have to race through it. What do you think of Jerry? Who's Jerry? Jerry Morton. His name's Gerald. How should I know that? You stayed with him. Weren't there any letters lying about? I dare say, but I didn't happen to read them, I answered, somewhat tartly. Oh, don't be stupid. I meant the envelopes. What's he like? All right. Rather the Kipling type, you know. Very keen on his work, hearty, empire builder, and all that sort of thing. I don't mean that, cried Janet, not without impatience. I mean, what does he look like? More or less like everybody else, I think. Of course, I should recognise him if I saw him again, but I can't picture him to myself very distinctly. He looks clean. Oh my God, said Janet. Are you a novelist or are you not? What's the colour of his eyes? I don't know. You must know. You can't spend a week with anyone without knowing that their eyes are blue or brown. Is he fair or dark? Neither. Is he tall or short? Average, I should say. Are you trying to irritate me? No, he's just ordinary. There's nothing in him to attract your attention. He's neither plain nor good-looking. He looks quite decent. He looks a gentleman. Marjorie says he has a charming smile and a lovely figure. I dare say. He's absolutely crazy about her. What makes you think that? I asked dryly. I've seen his letters. Who's that coming along here? Nothing that concerns me. Do you mean to say she's shown them to you? Why, of course. It's always difficult for a man to stomach the want of reticence that women betray in their private affairs. They have no shame. They will talk to one another without embarrassment of the most intimate matters. Modesty is a masculine virtue. But though a man may know this theoretically, each time he is confronted with women's lack of reserve, he suffers a new shock. I wondered what Morton would think if he knew that not only were his letters read by Janet Marsh as well as by Marjorie, but that she had been kept posted from day to day with the progress of his infatuation. According to Janet, he had fallen in love with Marjorie at first sight. The morning after they had met at my little supper party at Ciro's, he had rung up and asked her to come and have tea with him at some place where they could dance. While I listened to Janet's story, I was conscious, of course, that she was giving me Marjorie's view of the circumstances, and I kept an open mind. I was interested to observe that Janet's sympathies were with Marjorie. It was true that when Marjorie left her husband, it was her idea that Charlie should come to them for 2 or 3 weeks rather than stay on in miserable loneliness in the deserted flat, and she had been extraordinarily kind to him. She lunched with him almost every day because he had been accustomed to lunch every day with Marjorie. She took him for walks in Regent's Park and made Bill play golf with him on Sundays. She listened with wonderful patience to the story of his unhappiness and did what she could to console him. She was terribly sorry for him, but all the same, she was definitely on Marjorie's side, and when I expressed my disapproval of her, she came down on me like 1,000 of bricks. The affair thrilled her. She had been in it from the beginning when Marjorie, smiling, flattered, and a little doubtful, came and told her that she had a young man, to the final scene when Marjorie, exasperated and distraught, announced that she could not stand the strain any more and had packed her things and moved out of the flat. Of course, at first I couldn't believe my ears, she said. You know how Charlie and Marjorie were. They simply lived in one another's pockets. One couldn't help laughing at them. They were so devoted to one another. I never thought him a very nice little man, and heaven knows he wasn't very attractive physically, but one couldn't help liking him because he was so awfully nice to Marjorie. I rather envied her sometimes. They had no money and they lived in a hugger-mugger sort of way, but they were frightfully happy. Of course, I never thought anything would come of it. Marjorie was rather amused. Naturally, I don't take it very seriously, she told me, but it is rather fun to have a young man at my time of life. I haven't had any flowers sent me for years. I had to tell him not to send any more because Charlie would think it so silly. He doesn't know a soul in London, and he loves dancing, and he says I dance like a dream. It's miserable for him going to the theatre by himself all the time, and we've done 2 or 3 matinees together. It's pathetic to see how grateful he is when I say I'll go out with him. I must say, I said, he sounds rather a lamb. He is, she said. I knew you'd understand. You don't blame me, do you? Of course not, darling, I said. Surely you know me better than that. I'd do just the same in your place. Marjorie made no secret of her outings with Morton, and her husband chaffed her good-naturedly about her beau, but he thought him a very civil, pleasant-spoken young man, and was glad that Marjorie had someone to play with while he was busy. It never occurred to him to be jealous. The 3 of them dined together several times and went to a show, but presently Jerry Morton begged Marjorie to spend an evening with him alone. She said it was impossible, but he was persuasive. He gave her no peace, and at last she went to Janet and asked her to ring up Charlie one day and ask him to come to dinner and make a 4th at bridge. Charlie would never go anywhere without his wife, but the Marshs were old friends, and Janet made a point of it. She invented some cock and bull story that made it seem important that he should consent. Next day, Marjorie and she met. The evening had been wonderful. They had dined at Maidenhead and danced there and then had driven home through the summer night. He says he's crazy about me, Marjorie told her. Did he kiss you? Asked Janet. Of course, Marjorie chuckled. Don't be silly, Janet. He is awfully sweet, and, he is such a nice nature. Of course, I don't believe half the things he says to me. My dear, you're not going to fall in love with him. I have, said Marjorie. Darling, isn't it going to be rather awkward? No, it won't last. After all, he's going back to Borneo in the autumn. Well, one can't deny that it's made you look years younger. I know, and I feel years younger. Soon they were meeting every day. They met in the morning and walked in the park together or went to a picture gallery. They separated for Marjorie to lunch with her husband and after lunch met again and motored into the country or to some place on the river. Marjorie did not tell her husband. She very naturally thought he would not understand. How was it you never met Morton? I asked Janet. Oh, she didn't want me to. You see, we belong to the same generation, Marjorie and I. I can quite understand that. I see. Of course, I did everything I could. When she went out with Jerry, she was always supposed to be with me. I'm a person who likes to cross a T and dot an I. Were they having an affair? I asked. Oh no, Marjorie isn't that sort of woman at all. How do you know? She would have told me. I suppose she would. Of course I asked her, but she denied it point blank, and I'm sure she was telling me the truth. There's never been anything of that sort between them at all. It seems rather odd to me. Well, you see, Marjorie is a very good woman. I shrugged my shoulders. She was absolutely loyal to Charlie. She wouldn't have deceived him for anything in the world. She couldn't bear the thought of having any secret from him. As soon as she knew she was in love with Jerry, she wanted to tell Charlie. Of course, I begged her not to. I told her it wouldn't do any good and it would only make Charlie miserable. And after all, the boy was going away in a couple of months. It didn't seem much good to make a lot of fuss about a thing that couldn't possibly last. But Jerry's imminent departure was the cause of the crash. The Bishops had arranged to go abroad as usual and proposed to motor through Belgium, Holland, and the north of Germany. Charlie was busy with maps and guides. He collected information from friends about hotels and roads. He looked forward to his holiday with the bubbling excitement of a schoolboy. Marjorie listened to him, discussing it with a sinking heart. They were to be away 4 weeks, and in September Jerry was sailing. She could not bear to lose so much of the short time that remained to them, and the thought of the motor tour filled her with exasperation. As the interval grew shorter and shorter, she grew more and more nervous. At last she decided that there was only one thing to do. Charlie, I don't want to come on this trip, she interrupted him suddenly, one day when he was talking to her at some restaurant he had just heard of. I wish you'd get someone else to go with you. He looked at her blankly. She was startled at what she had said, and her lips trembled a little. Why, what's the matter? Nothing's the matter. I don't feel like it. I want to be by myself for a bit. Are you ill? No, I've never been better in my life. I'm in love. You? Whom with? Jerry. He looked at her in amazement. He could not believe his ears. She mistook his expression. It's no good blaming me. I can't help it. He's going away in a few weeks. I'm not going to waste the little time he has left. He burst out laughing. Marjorie, how can you make such a damned fool of yourself? You're old enough to be his mother. She flushed. He's just as much in love with me as I am with him. Has he told you so? 1,000 times. He's a bloody liar, that's all. He chuckled. His fat stomach rippled with mirth. He thought it a huge joke. I dare say Charlie did not treat his wife in the proper way. Janet seemed to think he should have been tender and compassionate. He should have understood. I saw the scene that was in her mind's eye, the stiff upper lip, the silent sorrow, and the final renunciation. Women are always sensitive to the beauty of the self-sacrifice of others. These birds are so deathly quiet that it's starting to freak me out. Are you Birdie Num Num Zombies? Well, what are you doing? Sitting there silently like dead stool pigeons. Oh, wake up. Come alive. Fly around the room. Be real birds. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, little Kermie and little Bo. Well, at least he moved and turned around. For a moment I thought they might actually die while I'm sitting here reading you stories. That would be awful, wouldn't it? What a dreadful thought. Things that freak me out all of a sudden in the middle of my story, but they're literally just sitting there like hanging on every syllable as if I'm reading to them. Maybe they think I'm reading to them. Oh well, it's companionable for us, isn't it, birds? What else are we going to talk about? The price of millet on the stock market? Or the AI overlords taking over the birdie realms? We won't allow that to happen, by the gods. Right, where was I? Women are always sensitive to the beauty of the self-sacrifice of others. Janet would have sympathised also if he had flown into a violent passion, broken one or two pieces of furniture, which he would have had to replace, or given Marjorie a sock in the jaw. But to laugh at her was unpardonable. I did not point out that it was very difficult for a rather stout and not very tall professor of pathology, aged 55, to act all of a sudden like a caveman. Anyhow, the excursion to Holland was given up, and the bishops stayed in London through August. They were not very happy. They lunched and dined together every day because they had been in the habit of doing so for so many years, and the rest of the time Marjorie spent with Jerry. The hours she passed with him made up for all she had to put up with, and she had to put up with a good deal. Charlie had a ribald and sarcastic humour, and he made himself very funny at her expense and at Jerry's. He persisted in refusing to take the matter seriously. He was vexed with Marjorie for being so silly. but apparently it never occurred to him that she might have been unfaithful to him. I commented upon this to Janet. He never suspected it even, she said. He knew Marjorie much too well. The weeks passed, and at last Jerry sailed. He went from Tilbury, and Marjorie saw him off. When she came back, she cried for 48 hours of bliss. Sweetheart. Charlie watched her with increasing exasperation. His nerves were very much frayed. "Look here, Marjorie," he said at last. "I've been very patient with you, but now you must pull yourself together. This is getting past a joke." "Why can't you leave me alone?" she cried. "I've lost everything that made life lovely to me." "Don't be such a fool," he said. I do not know what else he said, but he was unwise enough to tell her what he thought of Jerry, and I gather that the picture he drew was virulent. It started the first violent scene they had ever had. She had borne Charlie's jibes when she knew that she would see Jerry in an hour or next day. But now that she had lost him forever, she could bear them no longer. She had held herself in for weeks. Now she flung her self-control to the winds. Perhaps she never knew exactly what she said to Charlie. He had always been irascible, and at last he hit her. They were both frightened when he had. He seized a hat and flung out of the flat. During all that miserable time they had shared the same bed, but when he came back in the middle of the night, he found that she had made herself up a shakedown on the sofa in the sitting room. "You can't sleep there," he said. "Don't be so silly. Come to bed." "No, I won't. Leave me alone." For the rest of the night they wrangled, but she had her way and now made up her bed every night on the sofa. But in that tiny flat they could not get away from one another. They could not even get out of sight or out of hearing of one another. I'd go stark raving mad. I hate being confined with other people. Ugh. Anyway, where was I? They had lived in such intimacy for so many years that it was an instinct for them to be together. He tried to reason with her. He thought her incredibly stupid and argued with her interminably in the effort to show her how wrong-headed she was. He could not leave her alone. He would not let her sleep, and he talked half through the night till they were both exhausted. He thought he could talk her out of love. For 2 or 3 days at a time they would not speak to one another. Then, one day, coming home, he found her crying bitterly. The sight of her tears distracted him. He told her how much he loved her and sought to move her by the recollection of all the happy years they had spent together. He wanted to let bygones be bygones. He promised never to refer to Jerry again. Could they not forget the nightmare they had been through? But the thought of all that But the thought of all that a reconciliation implied revolted her. She told him she had a racking headache and asked him to give her a sleeping draught. She pretended to be still asleep when he went out next morning, but the moment he was gone, she packed up her things and left. She had a few trinkets that she had inherited, and by selling them, she got a little money. She took a room at a cheap boarding house and kept her address a secret from Charlie. It was when he found she had left him that he went all to pieces. The shock of her flight broke him. He told Janet that his loneliness was intolerable. He wrote to Marjorie imploring her to come back and asked Janet to intercede for him. He was willing to promise anything. He abased himself. Marjorie was obdurate. "Do you think she'll ever go back?" I asked Janet. "She says not." I had to leave then, for it was nearly 1:30, and I was bound for the other end of town. The other end of London. London town. Looks like the sun's coming out. 2 or 3 days later, I got a telephone message from Marjorie asking if I could see her. She suggested coming to my rooms. I asked her to tea. I tried to be nice to her. Her affairs were no business of mine. But in my heart I thought her a very silly woman, and I dare say my manner was cold. She had never been handsome, and the passing years had changed her little. She had still those fine dark eyes, and her face was astonishingly unlined. She was very simply dressed, and if she wore makeup, it was so cunningly put on that I did not perceive it. She had still the charm she had always had of perfect naturalness and of a kindly humour. "I want you to do something for me if you will," she began without beating about the bush. "What is it?" "Charlie is leaving the Marshes today and going back to the Going back to the flat. I'm afraid his first few days there will be rather difficult. It would be awfully nice of you if you'd ask him to dinner or something. I'll have a look at my book. I'm told he's been drinking heavily. It's such a pity. I wish you could give him a hint." "I understand he's had some domestic worries of late," I said, perhaps acidly. Marjorie flushed. She gave me a pained look. She winced as though I had struck her. "Of course you've known him ever so much longer than you've known me. It's natural that you should take his part." "My dear, to tell you the truth, I've known him all these years chiefly on your account. I have never very much liked him, but I thought you were awfully nice." She smiled at me, and her smile was very sweet. She knew what I meant. She knew that I meant what I said. "Do you think I was a good wife to him?" "Perfect. He used to put people's backs up. A lot of people didn't like him, but I never found him difficult. He was awfully fond of you." "I know. We had a wonderful time together. For 16 years we were perfectly happy." She paused and looked down. I had to leave him. It became quite impossible. That cat and dog life we were leading was too awful. I never see why two persons should go on living together if they don't want to. You see, it was awful for us. We'd always lived in such close intimacy. We could never get away from one another. At the end, I hated the sight of him. I don't suppose the situation was easy for either of you. It wasn't my fault that I fell in love. You see, it was quite a different love from the one I felt for Charlie. There was always something maternal in that and protective. I was so much more reasonable than he was. He was unmanageable, but I could always manage him. Jerry was different. Her voice grew soft and her face was transfigured with glory. He gave me back my youth. I was a girl to him, and I could depend on his strength and be safe in his care. He seemed to me a very nice lad, I said slowly. I imagine he'll do well. He was very young for the job he had when I ran across him. He's only 29 now, isn't he? She smiled softly. She knew quite well what I meant. I never made any secret of my age to him. He says it doesn't matter. I knew this was true. She was not the woman to have lied about her age. She had found a sort of fierce delight in telling him the truth about herself. How old are you? 44. What are you going to do now? I've written to Jerry and told him I've left Charlie. As soon as I hear from him, I'm going out to join him. I was staggered. You know, it's a very primitive little colony he's living on. I'm afraid you'll find your position rather awkward. He made me promise that if I found my life impossible after he left, I'd go to him. Are you sure you're wise to attach so much importance to the things a young man says when he's in love? Again, that really beautiful look of exaltation came into her face. Yes, when the young man happens to be Jerry. My heart sank. I was silent for a moment. Then I told her the story of the road Jerry Morton had built. I dramatised it, and I think I made it rather effective. What did you tell me that for? She asked when I finished. I thought it a rather good story. She shook her head and smiled. No, you wanted to show me that he was very young and enthusiastic and so keen on his work that he hadn't much time to waste on other interests. I wouldn't interfere with his work. You don't know him as I do. He's incredibly romantic. He looks upon himself as a pioneer. I've caught from him something of his excitement at the idea of taking part in the opening up of a new country. It is rather splendid, isn't it? It makes life here seem very humdrum and commonplace. But of course it's very lonely there, even the companionship of a middle-aged woman. may be worth having. Are you proposing to marry him? I asked. I'll leave myself in his hands. I want to do nothing that he does not wish. She spoke with so much simplicity. There was something so touching in her self-surrender that when she left me, I no longer felt angry with her. Of course, I thought her very foolish, but if the folly of men made one angry, one would pass one's life in a state of chronic ire. I thought all would come right. She said Jerry was romantic. He was, but the romantics in this workaday world only get away with their nonsense because they have at bottom a shrewd sense of reality. The mugs are the people who take their vapourings at their face value. The English are romantic. That is why other nations think them hypocritical. They are not. They set out in all sincerity for the kingdom of God, but the journey is arduous, and they have reason to pick up any gilt-edged investment that offers itself by the way. The British soul, like Wellington's armies, marches on its belly. I supposed that Jerry would go through a bad quarter of an hour when he received Marjorie's letter. My sympathies were not deeply engaged in the matter, and I was only curious to see how he would extricate himself from the pass he was in. I thought Marjorie would suffer a bitter disappointment. Well, that would do her no great harm, and then she would go back to her husband, and I had no doubt the pair of them, chastened, would live in peace, quiet, and happiness for the rest of their lives. The event was different. It happened that it was quite impossible for me to make any sort of engagement with Charlie Bishop for some days, but I wrote to him and asked him to dine with me one evening in the following week. I proposed, though with misgiving, that we should go to a play. I knew he was drinking like a fish, and when tight, he was noisy. I hoped he would not make a nuisance of himself in the theatre. We arranged to meet at our club and dine at 7 because the piece we were going to began at 8:15. I arrived. I waited. He did not come. I rang up his flat and could get no reply, so concluded that he was on his way. I hate missing the beginning of a play, and I waited impatiently in the hall so that when he came we could go straight upstairs. To save time, I had ordered dinner. The clock pointed to 7:30, then 7:45. I did not see why I should wait for him any longer, so walked up to the dining room and ate my dinner alone. He did not appear. I got a call through from the dining room to the Marshes, and presently was told by a waiter that Bill Marsh was at the end of the wire. I say, do you know anything about Charlie Bishop? I said. We were dining together and going to a play, and he hasn't turned up. He died this afternoon. What? My exclamation was so startled that 2 or 3 people within earshot looked up. The dining room was full and the waiters were hurrying to and fro. The telephone was on the cashier's desk, and a wine waiter came up with a bottle of hock and 2 long-stemmed glasses on a tray, and gave the cashier a chit. The portly steward, showing 2 men to a table, jostled me. "Where are you speaking from?" asked Bill. I suppose he heard the clatter that surrounded me. When I told him, he asked me if I could come round as soon as I had finished my dinner. Janet wanted to speak to me. "I'll come at once," I said. I found Janet and Bill sitting in the drawing room. He was reading the paper and she was playing patience. She came forward swiftly when the maid showed me in. She walked with a sort of spring, crouching a little on silent feet, like a panther stalking his prey. I saw at once that she was in her element. She gave me her hand and turned her face away to hide her eyes brimming with tears. Her voice was low and tragic. "I brought Marjorie here and put her to bed. The doctor has given her a sedative. She's all in. Isn't it awful?" She gave a sound that was something between a gasp and a sob. I don't know why these things always happen to me. The Bishops had never kept a servant, but a charwoman went in every morning, cleaned the flat and washed up the breakfast things. She had her own key. That morning she had gone in as usual and done the sitting room. Since his wife had left him, Charlie's hours had been irregular, and she was not surprised to find him asleep. But the time passed, and she knew he had his work to go to. She went to the bedroom door and knocked. There was no answer. She thought she heard him groaning. She opened the door softly. He was lying in bed on his back and was breathing stertorously. He did not wake. She called him. Something about him frightened her. She went to the flat on the same landing. It was occupied by a journalist. He was still in bed when she rang and opened the door to her in pyjamas. "Beg pardon, sir," she said, "but would you just come and have a look at my gentleman? I don't think he's well." The journalist walked across the landing and into Charlie's flat. There was an empty bottle of Veronal by the bed. "I think you'd better fetch a policeman," he said. A policeman came and ran through to the police station for an ambulance. One would have thought that you'd call the ambulance in the first instance, wouldn't you? It's a bit ridiculous. Anyway, carrying on. They took Charlie to Charing Cross Hospital. He never recovered consciousness. Marjorie was with him at the end. "Of course there'll have to be an inquest," said Janet. "It's quite obvious what happened. He's been sleeping awfully badly for the last 3 or 4 weeks, and I suppose he'd been taking Veronal. He must have taken an overdose by accident." "Is that what Marjorie thinks?" I asked. "She's too upset to think anything, but I told her I was positive he hadn't committed suicide. I mean, he wasn't that sort of a man. Am I right, Bill?" "Yes, dear," he answered. "Did he leave any letter?" "No, nothing. Oddly enough, Marjorie got a letter from him this morning. Well, hardly a letter, just a line. 'I'm so lonely without you, darling.' That's all. But of course, That means nothing, and she's promised to say nothing about it at the inquest. I mean, what is the use of putting ideas in people's heads? Everyone knows that you never can tell with Veronal. I wouldn't take it myself for anything in the world, but it was quite obviously an accident. Am I right, Bill? Yes, dear, he answered. I saw that Janet was quite determined to believe that Charlie Bishop had not committed suicide, but how far in her heart she believed what she wanted to believe, I was not sufficiently expert in female psychology to know. And of course, it might be that she was right. It is unreasonable to suppose that a middle-aged scientist should kill himself because his middle-aged wife leaves him, and it is extremely plausible that, exasperated by sleeplessness, and in all probability far from sober, he took a larger dose of the sleeping draught than he realized. Anyhow, that was the view the coroner took of the matter. It was indicated to him that of late Charles Bishop had given way to habits of intemperance which had caused his wife to leave him, and it was quite obvious that nothing was further from his thoughts than to put an end to himself. The coroner expressed his sympathy with the widow and commented very strongly on the dangers of sleeping draughts. I hate funerals, but Janet begged me to go to Charlie's. Several of his colleagues at the hospital had intimated their desire to come, but at Marjorie's wish they were dissuaded, and Janet and Bill, Marjorie and I were the only persons who attended it. We were to fetch the hearse from the mortuary, and they offered to call for me on their way. I was on the lookout for the car, and when I saw it drive up, went downstairs. But Bill got out and met me just inside the door. "Half a minute," he said. "I've got something to say to you. Janet wants you to come back afterwards and have tea. She says it's no good Marjorie moping, and after tea we'll play a few rubbers of bridge. Can you come?" "Like this?" I asked. I had a tailcoat on and a black tie and my evening dress trousers. "Oh, that's all right. It'll take Marjorie's mind off." Very well. But we did not play bridge after all. Janet, with her fair hair, was very smart in her deep mourning, and she played the part of the sympathetic friend with amazing skill. She cried a little, wiping her eyes delicately so as not to disturb the black on her eyelashes, and when Marjorie sobbed broken-heartedly, put her arm tenderly through hers. She was a very present help in trouble. We returned to the house. There was a telegram for Marjorie. She took it and went upstairs. I presumed it was a message of condolence from one of Charlie's friends who had just heard of his death. Bill went to change, and Janet and I went up to the drawing room and got the bridge table out. She took off her hat and put it on the piano. "It's no good being hypocritical," she said. "Of course, Marjorie has been frightfully upset. She must pull herself together now. A rubber of bridge will help her to get back to her normal state." Naturally, I'm dreadfully sorry about poor Charlie, but as far as he was concerned, I don't believe he'd ever have got over Marjorie's leaving him, and one can't deny that it has made things much easier for her. She wired to Jerry this morning. What about? To tell him about poor Charlie. At that moment the maid came to the room. Will you go up to Mrs. Bishop, please, ma'am? She wants to see you. Yes, of course. She went out of the room quickly and I was left alone. Bill joined me presently and we had a drink. Of course Janet came back. She handed a telegram to me. It read as follows: For God's sake, await letter. Jerry. What do you think it means? She asked me. What it says, I replied. Idiot. Of course I've told Marjorie that it doesn't mean anything, but she's rather worried. It must have crossed her cable telling him that Charles was dead. I don't think she feels very much like bridge after all. I mean, it would be rather bad form to play on the very day her husband has been buried. Quite, I said. Of course, he may wire an answer to the cable. He's sure to do that, isn't he? The only thing we can do now is to sit tight and wait for his letter. I saw no object in continuing the conversation. I left. In a couple of days, Janet rang me up to tell me that Marjorie had received a telegram of condolence from Morton. She repeated it to me. Dreadfully distressed to hear sad news. Deeply sympathise with your great grief. Love, Jerry. What do you think of it? She asked me. I think it's very proper. Of course he couldn't say he was as pleased as Punch, could he? Not with any delicacy. And he did put in love. I imagined how those women had examined the two telegrams from every point of view and scrutinized every word to press from it every possible shade of meaning. I almost heard their interminable conversations. I don't know what will happen to Marjorie if he lets her down now, Janet went on. Of course it remains to be seen if he's a gentleman. Rot, I said, and rang off quickly. I'm smirking. It's just a bit of a synchronous parallel there. Never mind. Let it go. In the course of the following days, I dined with the Marshes a couple of times. Marjorie looked tired. I guessed that she awaited the letter that was on the way with sickening anxiety. Grief and fear had worn her to a shadow. She seemed very fragile now, and she had acquired a spiritual look that I had never seen in her before. She was very gentle, very grateful for every kindness shown her, and in her smile, unsure and a little timid, was an infinite pathos. Her helplessness was very appealing. but Morton was several thousand miles away. Then one morning Janet rang me up. "The letter has come. Marjorie says I can show it to you. Will you come round?" Her tense voice told me everything. When I arrived, Janet gave it to me. I read it. It was a very careful letter, and I guessed that Morton had written it a good many times. It was very kind, and he had evidently taken great pains to avoid saying anything that could possibly wound Marjorie, but what transpired was his terror. It was obvious that he was shaking in his shoes. He had felt, apparently, that the best way to cope with the situation was to be mildly facetious. He made very good fun of the white people in the colony. What would they say if Marjorie suddenly turned up? Oh, I have to take this call. I'll have to cut it short. And I missed it. I'll have to cut it short, sorry. Be back soon.